Good morning, folks. When Peter asked me to speak at the conference, I've no problem, as anybody who knows me, to speak. It's one of the gifts I've been given with. But I wanted to try and add value. And I've sat in the room where you are sitting now. And what I want to try and do is, I want to try and leave you with a toolkit that when you leave today, no matter whether you're with the minor hurlers, the under-14s, or a senior county or senior club team, I don't care what level it's at, we're all coaches in the room. What I want to do is I want to leave you with something you can say, yeah, okay, I can use that to add value to what I do. And I suppose the mere fact that you're here today means that you want to get better. We all want to get better. I was at a 2-day conference down in the convention centre last couple of days. And when you go, you reflect, you listen, and you learn. And I think over a day, if you take 3 things away, well, then it's been a good day, and you network and you see friends. So when I was putting something together, and I was listening to John Horan speaking about wellness, and then I was saying, you know, jeepers, I'm doing this about creating a performance environment. But I purposely didn't put in high. I didn't put in high performance, because that term high performance, you know, can be a bit of a misnomer. What does high performance mean? And I don't care whether you're with, you know, the nursery team in your club. That environment has to be about performance. Now, you might look at me aghast and go, gee, under 8s doing performance. But you know what? It's all relative. And that performance, and Owen Gately was speaking up there, he's from my own club, and I thought he put it brilliantly. You know, the environment has to be right, it has to be fun, and then children learn. So it doesn't matter what age group or what level, it's about creating that environment. And I've been lucky to be in some very, very good environments. And you know what? Never had the talent to play out there. And say most coaches are failed players. But the thing is, when you're out there and you get success, it's a nice place to be. I've also been out there when we were beaten in an All-Ireland final by Bridget's when I was with Ballymun, beaten by 1 point. And you just go, wow, how did that happen? And again, I want to share some of that with you and go through what I'm going to go through as well. We hear things, looking at this, I've been told by my cameraman here to not go around the room, so forgive me for staying here all the time. So developing a performance environment. If you look at the iceberg of ignorance, most of us busy coaches, when we go to a training session, we might be rushing to get there. You're coming from work. You run out. You set up your cones. You're thinking about it. People say, what's your session plan? You know, what are you doing this week? And sometimes that's all great in theory, but we've all been late through traffic, and all of a sudden you're rushing in, and what's happening? But if you look at the iceberg of ignorance, only 4% of problems are known to top managers. So when you're beaten, and Stuart Lancaster was speaking at the conference the other day, and I thought he might have delved a little bit more about the English defeat. But he was talking about when he was beaten, he learned more from that. The All Blacks will say, learn from your defeats. And there's no doubt about it that you do learn an awful lot from your defeats. When I was with Luke and Sarsfields in my final year, we beat Kilmacud Crokes to stay up in Division 1, and we were really excited about staying on the following year and really improving the process. Then we were sacked. So that was the end of that. So come here, good luck. You don't have a face that matches anymore. So we were gone. First time I was sacked in my life. Second time I was from Dublin Hurlers. But I mean, you put those 2 things together and you say to yourself, my God, you know, we were going to try and improve the process, but we were gone. But you do learn a lot from your defeats. But if you think about it, 96% of problems are not known to top managers. So you're walking in there thinking about you, the coach. And are you really thinking about, do you know every player's name? Do you understand what's happening behind the scenes? Do you understand the little clicks that are happening? Are you having good conversations to make good connections, which lead to good commitment? And I think that's why we should all be an hour early before training, because they're the chance to go around and ask, you know, somebody about how their little kid's getting on, how was their week, how's their studies going, how are they enjoying training? They're the little things, as opposed to going in like the almighty coach and all of a sudden you're on point and there's never really a personality there. We hear this all the time. Got to stick to the process. You know, the process. We're process driven. And sometimes, and I love the leadership stuff, but I get a little bit tired of cliche. And it's up there, you know, got to get the culture right. You know, we've got to really sort of, you know, develop our hierarchical goals. And when you nail it right down, sometimes when you come to a conference like this and you hear stuff, it crystallizes what you're already doing. Because you're all good coaches and you're all in the environment of coaching. You're already doing it. And sometimes it's like the analogy I always use is you get a jigsaw. Remember when you were a kid, you got a 1,000-piece jigsaw? It's far too sophisticated now. Jigsaws are probably gone now. It's not tech enough. But you got the 1,000-piece jigsaw and eventually you put the piece together. And when they came together, there was a couple of pieces missing. then all of a sudden there was no picture. So sometimes when you get a framework or you get something that puts a picture together, you go, you know what, I'm doing that already. But now I understand part of the process. So we have a process, but do we really? Process in the English dictionary says the series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So you had a shower this morning, you brushed your teeth, that was a process. You drove your car, that was a process. But you don't get into the car and think, I'm going through the process now of engine on, drive the car, change the gear. You just do it. But do you do your coaching like that? You know, do you just go through the motions as opposed to a process that's consistent? And when you listen to the best practice out there, they have a process that all of a sudden becomes second nature. They're doing it. But the process is improving all the time. The process ultimately has to lead to a goal. And we heard inside there, but, you know, underage players, you know, 52% of them still want to win because children are innately competitive. You know, if you took goals out of there and said, you know, there's no goals out there, go out and play the match. They'd wonder, well, what's happening? How are we actually going to, you know, achieve something? So the goal could be keep a good level of squad. I looked after Luke and minor girls last year, really enjoyed it. And you know what my objective and goal from the start was? Make it fun and keep 20 training. And I did. We got to a county semi-final in Division 2, and that was great. That was a byproduct. But keeping the players. I remember when I was at Lucan Seniors, we'd 7 training one night of training. You know, because now the bus leaves in summertime and goes to the bigger island across in the west. And that's not in Ishir, that's the States. So, you know, you're keeping players. That could be a goal. Loss of players, attrition, high levels of attrition. You know, people talk about, oh, Dublin has big clubs. I think we've a zillion teams in Lucan. But yet, you could be lucky to keep 20 because the distractions are huge. And what levels of goals have you got? You might have level for the short term, medium, and then longer term as well. But ultimately, and I like the word transformation, because you want to make a difference. That might be a difference with self-esteem. That might be a difference with belonging. That might be a difference with keeping that sense of club. Because when you've soldiered with somebody in a team, when you meet them at a conference like this, or you meet them down the street, or you meet them in the shopping centre, or wherever you meet them, there is a bond. You know, I see people here that I've worked with before, and you meet them, you know you've soldiered together, and that difference in your life has been good, because ultimately, when you think about it, if we drop Gaelic games out of our lives, there could be quite a big void. So that's very important to get to transformation. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. But the question that I would put to you is, do you reflect every day before you go training, before you coach? Because as coaches, we're very player-centric. It's all about the player. We want the player to get everything. But sometimes, in order to change you, I've got to change me. And sometimes what you've got to really do is reflect on yourself and say, hang on a second, what am I like as a coach? I tutored a chap, I lecture as well, and I tutored a chap that was lead dancer with Riverdance, Kerry chap. And I said to him, Paddy, what did you do before you went on stage every time? He said, Ken, I went into a dark room, I played my favourite music, and then I came out on point. Now, do you play your favourite music in the car? Do you go on point? Are you going out with a heavy head and a really angry face, and all of a sudden you set the tone? So it's the small little things that you go along with. So if we look at this, we want a transformation process. And what I want to do today is I want to give you a model. And that model is a process model that I came across in 1998, 21 years ago now. But it resonated with me to say, this makes sense. Because we all like frameworks. They're cool. But if it's a picture, we're visual learners, it's there. As opposed to having this plethora of ideas to say, oh, I've got to change that. We were beaten by Armagh in a ladies' game out in Abbottstown 2 years ago in a league game. And there was a chap who was just on the periphery of the backroom team. And what's the first question people ask you as a coach when you're beaten? Were they fit enough? But when you win, geez, they're flying. You know, when they're winning, oh, geez, they're top of the ground, aren't they? But when you lose, are they fit enough? So, you know, it's an interesting question. And as S&C coaches, if there's a lot of you in the room, we resent that, don't we? So when we hit, we just say, no, it wasn't. So that was it, you know. But you really got to look at the transformation process. So when you look at this model, and I'm going to give it to you there, and it's going to actually blow your mind. There's the model. But I'm not going to show it to you yet. I'm going to bring it back. Because if you see that now, you'll all leave the room and go for coffee. So when you look at your hierarchy of goals, you can use this process model for your overall strategy. You can use it that if you're going in as the new senior club manager this year, if you're going in as the under 14 going to Fela, if you're going into whatever team. I'm not going to say that again. Whatever team you're involved in, you can use it for your overall strategy. You can use it for specific functions. Specific functions might be the load management of the players. I love John Horn's analogy about horses. I look after a lad whose dad is a horse breeder, and we talk about horses and humans all the time. Because Aidan O'Brien or Joseph O'Brien won't run a horse today, tomorrow, and the next day, or 2 races in the one day, but we do that with humans. From a load management point of view, the more teams they play on, the bigger the badge of honour. It's like chestnuts when you were a kid. You know, when you're 20, beat someone else's 20 and your chestnut was then worth of 40? No? Okay, well, that was chestnuts. That was good fun back in the day. So the more teams you play for, it doesn't mean badge of honour, because load management is critical. It could be specific issues. They're not fit enough. Okay, they're not fit enough. So let's look at the process. Is it the intervention that you're doing when you're training them? Or is it their load management? Is it a recovery management? Is there a time? I spoke to one of my players with Dublin last night and I said, I don't want to see you till March. And she went, right. And of course, what do players do when they hear that? They think, March. You know, now she's an established player. But she's just gone through a club process, finished in December. She's been with us since last January 5th. Does she need to be trained in January and February? Don't think so. But that might mean we mightn't do well in the National League because we have a few rock stars that won't be around. But ultimately, they'll come back tenfold because they're not horses. And if they were horses, they'd probably be treated better and they wouldn't be running every day. So we have a transformation process. And what is it? So we look at the input-output model. So what you put in, ultimately you put out. And I think sometimes we start very much at this level here. We're looking at inputs. Oh yeah, I've got this, I've got that. Yeah, I've got the facility, I've got that. But before you start, look at the output. I know of club teams that are training 5 days a week. I know of a club team that when the lad said when he was meeting the new manager, I can't train on Monday night in the gym because I actually teach, he said, no, you're either committed or you're not. Club, because it should be fun. But clubs want to be counties. Counties want to be interprovincial rugby teams. But we forget lads are studying, lassies are studying, they're working. You know, I've lectured in UCD for 18 years. And Josh van der Fleer is a player I always cite. Josh played rugby for Wicklow, then he went to Wesley, then he went to UCD, then he went to Leinster, now he's with Ireland. But he's a full-time professional contract. He can relax and rest and recover. The lad who's playing inter-county or club training 4 times a week could be travelling, could have high-level pressure in work, and all of a sudden, some Amadon is saying to him, you must train in the gym in a collective session. When we got to the All-Ireland final with Ballymun, yes, we were beaten, but we won Dublin, we won Leinster, we trained twice a week. And we played on a Sunday. And we gave them their gym programme, they trained on their own. Because sometimes it's nice not to be around your teammates. I know we can't really shout that out, but it is. Because that might mean if I'm flexible, I can train on Monday morning at 6:30 and be done, and have Monday night off. And relax, and then be ready for Tuesday night. But when you come with an energy, it's because you're rested, you know? So from that perspective, look at your inputs and your outputs. But I would start and say, look at the outputs first. Start with the end in mind. And if you start with the end in mind, you then know the journey you're going on. So if you're looking at, let's say, a minor B hurling team, well, and you really realise, you know what, it's going to be a challenge to win something with these. If you put winning as your output, well, you're on a road to disaster. Whereas if you're looking at developmental aspects, I coached a hockey team for 10 years, from 95 to 2004, and we ended up winning a European silver medal. But in 1995, our first goal output was get less yellow cards, because there were a hockey team in Tala. And if you're playing hockey in Tala, it's just up about there with ballet. So you got to be really tough. But if you're tough, sometimes you get a lot of yellow cards. And the second thing was concede less goals. They were our 2 indicators, our 2 outputs. The third input was we brought in Declan Kidney's brother, Aidan Kidney, who's passed, God rest him. Myself as an outside physical trainer. And all of a sudden, the outputs were saying, right, we're going to have that. And that year, we won the Leinster Cup. Because we brought a process of people, but we looked at the output that was discipline, because it was an issue. And secondly, what did we want to concede? Less goals. So when you look at your outputs, that could be development of a player. Mick Bowen, who I work closely with, and a good pal of mine, has a great term. He said, if you've coached a player to kick on one side or hit a schlitter on one side, you've only half coached them. I think it's a great term. So what are you trying to develop? Or are you really boosting Shawnee because he can, really kick that ball hard and he can really win ball in midfield and he's the powerhouse of the team. But you know what? He's only under 8. Develop him. Develop the other players. I would think when you look at underage, don't develop rock stars in isolation. Don't develop 3 players that become your rock stars that all of a sudden, because think about it, go games are wonderful, but 3 players will dominate it. You want all your players kicking left and right, hitting left and right, and developing and enjoying and their self-esteem. Because you know what? You might be the only person all weeks that tells them they're great, smiles at them, because their teachers mightn't. Their parents might sort of be devoid of smiling, and all of a sudden they want something to boost them in their life. And I think that's the big thing that you as a coach has to resonate. Development of a coach. You're here to develop. Because sometimes it's like the tailor's the worst dressed person. You have to develop yourself. I would always compare us as coaches to batteries. And what we need to do is we need to make sure the battery is full. And when I see teams, that coaches with 2 teams or 3 teams, I often wonder, because you're only a battery and it has to remain full. If you're not going to session with a full battery, well, then we have a problem, because the players will feed off that battery. You're the eye charger. Healthy and happy player. Are your players happy? Are they enjoying it? Because remember, Gaelic games is a hobby. And we forget that. In our pursuit of, isn't it, we've seen many skits where that big, throw the tea cup against the wall and get it really going, and it's the under 10s, and we laugh at that. But what are your goals? What are the players' goals? Are they enjoying it? Is it fun? And that starts with you as the coach. You set the tone. A friend of mine who's equally follically challenged says that bald coaches have to smile more because we can look a bit fierce without hair. I think hair would be wasted on a face like this. But apart from that, but that's the thing. Are you smiling? Are you there? Are you getting all your players' names? I worked with Joe Schmidt for 2 years, and I really enjoy that. And Joe knows every player's name. He has a smile, and he's a fierce character underneath it. He will be really ruthless, but he has a smile. And that's what we want to get. You give an energy, and don't lose sight of that as part of the process. Do you want to develop their skills? Without a doubt, and we've touched on that. And we talk about this culture. Bernard Brogan spoke at Pendulum the other day, and he was very, very good. And I was saying to him afterwards, he spoke about the 5 C's. And we all speak about culture. And what is culture? Culture is the way we do things here. But are you putting culture up as an iconic big C? Or are you actually living the culture? And you set the tone and the culture. How you greet your players at training. Is it ready? How you react to somebody not doing something right. Are you impatient? Are you surly? Are you coming with that energy to really get your players and recognise them and help them become better? Short-term, medium goals, and of course, overall goals. So what are your inputs? Your inputs are your players. Of course, they're your players. But you know what? Particularly if you're underage coaching, sometimes the under 10 might end up being a great under 14, or the under 14 might end up being a great minor. And I've seen that. And you've seen that. I remember in Mullingar, where I went to school, we had a fantastic lad who played with the Downs. And Paddy Walsh, if any of you know him, was a fantastic player. But he ended up not really playing after 23 because he was playing probably for 12 teams at 17 and 18. But he was a great player. So you've got to protect your players and know when to let them off and when to actually work them. Coaches, you're a huge input. And I didn't put that up first because obviously the players are the most important. But you bringing that energy and you bringing that enthusiasm and you bringing that knowledge and you knowing where you're going on the journey. Your support personnel. And I think that's a really critical thing. I remember when I went to county first, it was a bit of a culture shock. And the interdependent backroom team is quite critical. But people have to know their roles. And I would say that if you're at club level, not county, you don't need to be an American NFL backroom team. You don't need 48 support personnel. Because that's the way it's gone. And if I'm a player and I see backroom team, first question I'll ask is, what's he do? What's she do? You have to have clear role definition. So if somebody's with your team, it better be for a reason. And why are they there? And are they adding value? And if they're not adding value, well then they start to encroach onto other areas, and you don't want that. You want to make sure their expertise is actually clearly defined. The other thing that you're going to get is, and we used to see this, remember with Ballymun, first year we had 3 players went to Dublin, second year we had 8 players, and that was always a nightmare, because Kerner would say to me, we've got to reprogram them now. They come back from county, different culture, maybe a different set of values, sometimes very good, But they got to remember, club is where it started, club is where it finishes, and club is number one. And the other thing I would say, and I spoke to my own club there recently about this, I think club, not team. Because we all know that person in our club, don't we? This is my team. Oh, it's my team. Oh, no, you're not getting him. Oh, no. Why can't hurlers and footballers play dual sports in club? Because that's just about a matter of managers communicating. So, for example, if the club coach for hurling says, okay, I want Johnny playing a match on Sunday, trains with me Thursday, he warms down and debriefs with me on Tuesday. You want him for football the following week, you take him Thursday. He plays Sunday, he debriefs with me on Tuesday, and you get him again on Thursday. He's doing the same volume, same load management, but it's communication. But no, it's my player. Can't have him. Oh, no. You know, it's not a wife. It's not a husband. You know, you don't own them. You don't own them either. I know that. Before you know, geez, yeah, okay. Message to self. Yeah, okay, yeah. If I owned her, I'd sell her. No, I wouldn't. I'd get great money for her because she's the rock behind me. Anyway, the next thing would be facilities. Like, we trained in Ballymun back in the day. We talk about great facilities. Oh, you know, you need state-of-the-art facilities and you need, you know, big gyms and you need this and you need pitches and all weather. We trained the side of a pitch with lights on about a 70 metre by 15 metre space. But yet the camaraderie of the team was great. If you're based in Dublin, the best gym in Dublin, Phoenix Park. It's wonderful. You get so much work done up there. And again, that camaraderie. Because sometimes, you know, there was a time here we said, oh, you know, we're not getting enough swimmers going to the Olympics. We need 50-metre pools. We're probably about 5 on the island now, but I don't see us winning Olympic medals in swimming. So facilities are not often the answer. It's about environment, and it's about sometimes less can be actually more. So Aristotle says we are what we repeatedly do. And excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. And when you instill that stuff in, and I think as well, you got to be very careful you don't sweat the small stuff. So what really values to you? What do you really mean? So when your team trains, are they all in the same team kit or are they a mixture? But does that really matter? If they're all smiling and they're all happy and they're there on time and there's an honest shift going in, and I think John alluded to it inside as well, the session doesn't need to be 2 hours. If you're efficient and you expedite a good training session, you can get a hell of a lot in an hour and a half, an hour and a quarter, depending on this time of the year. Last night we did some Maz running, did a 1K time trial, did 12 bouts of 90-metre Maz, and between warm-up and all of that, started at 7:05, I was finished at 7:30. Job done. Over to football. So sometimes, you know, we don't need to do the Gettysburg Address and all of a sudden have 2-hour training sessions. Because again, it's a hobby, so you got to look at that. So, in the transformation process, we have inputs and outputs. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to look and say, and the process model would say, identify customers' requirements. And in this instance, in this model, your customer are your players. Your customer are your backroom team. Your customer might be your club chairman. Your customer might be the parents of players. And the great thing about coaching at senior level is you don't have to interact with parents. But underage, it's important to have a nice involvement, but remember the parameters. So identification of customer requirements and understand customer requirements from the get-go. It's not about you. It's about that player. It's about that group. What are their goals? And when you think about it, 9 o'clock till 10:30 on a Friday night, we used to train with Lucan Miners. I finished the session at 10:10, and they would stretch and warm down on their own, talking to each other as a social interaction. Young ones who are 17, 18 years of age. They enjoy that. Taught everything from false nails to eyelashes to spray tan. It was the girls' team. They enjoy that. So give them that time of socialization. We run an Active for Life program at DCU. One of the most important aspects of it is the cup of tea afterwards. Because we forget that socialization process because they're all busy. And particularly millennials, if you're training millennials who are so used to the dopamine effect of a phone, they can't have an interaction with a conversation, but they can talk to each other on phones. But are they having conversations that are real? So, if we look at this, so what does the coaching requirement? Expertise. I've been training teams since 1989. I started as a PT in the gym industry, but I would say there's an overemphasis sometimes on S&C. And you get a polarization because some football or hurling coach will go, no, we don't have enough of that. No, it's about football. I love the term, it's about putting the ball over the bar. Well, if you're not fit enough and you're not robust enough and you can't do it again and again and again, you won't be putting anything over the bar. But there's a balance. And it's about having it in balance and making sure that that player, all the segments of the pie are there for the player. Clear role definition. Being an interdependent part of a backroom team, knowing your role. And any of you who've gone from club to county, that's where at club we do everything, don't we? We wash the kit, we physically train them, we football train them, or hurling train them, whatever you do. Camogie train them, football train them. Sometimes when you go to county, it's longer and narrower, but you've got to know your role. Energy. You've got to bring in energy. If you took away one thing from this talk today, apart from the process model which you have, and this will be all online as well, bring your energy. Make it enjoyable. And there was a Harvard Business Review article recently that talked about the whole thing about, making a fun environment. Development and support. What's the players' requirements? Again, fun and enjoyment. They want to be skills developed. They want to be athletically developed. And again, a good pal of mine was coached by Mick O'Dwyer, and people say, Mick had them running. But when I listened to the training methods, he ran them longer, medium, and then into small-sided games. He had science in his gut the way he did it. So therefore, there's a time to run, there's a time to play, and there's a time. Ashley Jones, a couple of lads in the room would know him well, would always say, S&C coaches get a slice pan in off-season, pre-season, one slice of the bread coming to season, and crumbs during the season. But if your players are ready, then they're ready for skills and small-sided games, but you've got to make sure they're robust and ready. Welfare, education and load management. I'll go through those quickly, but they're very important. Are you managing your players' load? When your players come to you at training, one of the best methods, and I've spoken to the rugby guys who will say, have you got anything sophisticated to manage load? Very simple way of managing load is, we had a 75-minute session. It was an 8 out of 10. 8 5s are 40, 8 7s are 56. That was a 600-point session. And when you look at your sessions, so you're multiplying volume by what they feel is the RPE, the rate of perceived exertion. Yeah, that was a tough session. So if it was a 90-minute session by 6, it was a lighter, or say it's a 60-minute session by 6, 360. And when you're looking at their load over the weeks, you make sure you get no spikes. But load management is critical. So the first question, and the rugby guys will say this, what's the first thing you say to a player when they come to training? How are you today? What have you done yesterday? What have you done today? Especially underage. Have they played a school match that day? And all of a sudden you're saying, it's going to be a hard session tonight. What's wrong with saying to the player, step out, John, step out, Mary? Because if they've trained that day, what have you got on tomorrow? Look at their week in context and manage their load. Make the session time efficient. I've worked with coaches that will speak for 5 minutes in between drills, and the players are getting cold. So we'll warm up again now. Get it flowing, but have feedback. As they're recovering, get the feedback, move it on. Have it time efficient. And the other one I'd say is acknowledgement. Acknowledge your players, acknowledge the effort, and have empathy with them. Understand that they've come from a heavy day. You ever take a long drive for an hour and a half or an hour through traffic? You're fit for nothing. But yet they come through traffic or they come a long way, and yet you expect them to be energized bunnies ready to go. Have empathy. Lombardi says, winning's a habit. Watch your thoughts to become your beliefs. Watch your beliefs to become your words. Watch the words to become your actions. Watch your actions to become your habits. And watch your habits to become your character. Everything you say as a coach, your smile, your energy, the words you say, the acknowledgement, the remembering a player's name, all of that mixes up into, because nobody says, where'd you qualify from? What's your credibility? They might know what teams you were with before, but they will judge you on session 1, they'll judge you on session 2, and it never stops. So, the next ones, I've got a couple more to do. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we're doing okay. Looking at corrective action. This is a chance for you, and you're doing it today, to reflect and to see what process changes you need to make. And how often when we go through that 168 journey per week of the hours in it, do we sit back in a quiet room and say, okay, let me think of the sessions this week. Let me think of the sessions. What was that session like on Monday night? What did I do last night? Did I arrive with the energy? Was it planned well? Did the player get good output? Did it get me what I want to get in the context of my plan for the next 3 months? We have our schedule done for the next 3 months, right through National League and we're ready with that training plan right through. So each session's in context. But here's the thing. The horse whisperer will go out. If the horse is not feeling good today, leave the session, pull it back. Because that's where you've got to make sure that the player is ready. So getting that corrective action, reflective practice, could be in your session, the week, the month. How are you? How are you with the player? Is that player, there's nothing like, if you stay up here, is everyone feeling good in the room? Does anybody want to put up their hand and say, I'm having a bad day? That won't happen. But little conversations lead to connection, lead to commitment, and that's the conversations you want to have. Your calendar plan, your game, your weekly load management, and understanding your coach's load management. How many of us work with coaches that are running like busy bees, left, right, and center? You've got to arrive relaxed with that energy. Success is an iceberg. Once again, people see what's on top. They don't see the hard work that goes underneath, and they don't see your preparation. And part of that iceberg might be you in your car getting ready to go and do the session. So when we look at this process again, the next part of it I would say would be benchmarking. In terms of benchmarking, what does that mean? That means that you're looking outside your organization, outside your team, to make yourself better. And that leads to better inputs, which will lead to better outputs. So what are we talking about benchmarking? We're looking at best practice. We all read the leadership books. We've read Legacy, Jim Collins' Good to Great. We all read Fergus Connolly, 59 Rules. I'm not even at number 1 yet. I haven't opened it, but I've got the book. So what am I doing? What am I benchmarking? You might see one facet of a warm-up by the Kilkenny hurlers out there, Kerry footballers. You might see something from the All Blacks. You might see something from Manchester United, probably the greatest football team in the world, that you'd see something from them. I know Tom will love that comment. The point would be, but the thing about it is you'll see something. Go in and see warm-ups before a game. Go in and see, insightful documentaries. What are dressing rooms doing? Joe Schmidt brought in the habit of shaking hands before training. Why? Because if you're the rock star and I'm the new kid, all of a sudden Brian O'Driscoll's shaking my hand. How do I feel? And that sense of camaraderie. Do some of your senior players ignore the newbies? Or do they give them the sort of induction of, well, make it tough for him? But do they welcome them? Other teams. What are other teams doing? But delve and don't try and, the big thing is we always say in coaching, don't coach kids like they're adults. But you've got to look at little facets that might be good there. County, other sports, businesses. Look at the process of Ryanair. You might look at something and go, wow, I really like that. NFL, the humble aspect of players. And coaches, what are other coaches doing? I never lose, either I win or I learn. And that's a critical thing as you're going along. The final bit I would say to you is, as we wrap up, continuous improvement. You're in that process already. You're here to continuously improve, to make yourself better as coaches, but that means reflection, because I think sometimes, and they emphasize on the conferences on well-being, but sometimes we're so player-centric that we forget about ourselves. You get tired, you're eating Mars bars and drinking Costa coffee for a living, and all of a sudden you're trying to keep your energy up. Get your sleep patterns right, get yourself really good, and make sure you're there an hour before training to be ready. So your corrective action, player and coach development. Getting the quality of the environment. And quality is the simple things, little things done really well. Improving your process. Looking at your overall strategic direction for 3 years. And what else? Because you've the answer. Get the culture right. So finally, when we put it all together, that's what the model looks like. It's online, but for me, it's a compass. For me, it's something that helps me just reflect, look, and say, you know what? Are they fit enough? That's an isolated question. Let's look at it in the context of this and see exactly where we're at. Vern Gambetta said a few things there. Find yourself a mentor. Are you being coached? I did an MBA a few years ago. They always know when you've done an MBA because you tell people. That's what people say. I did one. But the big thing is, I got some coaching. Because if you're a manager in work, are you coached? Or are you just demanded of? How many of you are being coached by a coach? So find a mentor. Practice self-reflection. You can read it there. Listen, then be brave and honest. And stress the fundamentals. But the final thing I would say to you is, Drucker would say that culture eats strategy for breakfast. As a coach, enjoy it. As a coach, bring an energy to it. And as a coach, make your player better. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you got something out of that. Thank you.